Okay, so now that I've got my main base done, my handle is done, next thing I need to do is work on my side pieces. So my side pieces, I need to create 2 of them. So I need 2 squares that are 5 and 15/16 by 5 and 15/16. So again, I held that scrap piece for my handle, and I'm going to lay out 5 and 15/16 and mark. Again, I want to make sure that I stay parallel. So 5 and 15/16 and mark. And I'll draw my line. Now, what's nice about the foot shear is because there's no waste from a blade, I'm going to measure the next piece right off of this line. So 5 and 15/16 and 5 and 15/16 and draw out that line. Okay. The last thing I want to do is measure up from my edge 5 and 15/16. And again, I want to stay parallel, so I'll measure that on the opposite side to make sure I stay parallel. And I can go ahead and lay that out as well. Now, okay, so now I've got my lines laid out. So now I'm going to head to the foot shear. I'm going to go ahead and cut these 2 pieces out. So I've got my parts laid out for my sides. So now I just want to cut these 5 and 15/16 inch rectangles out. These are what I'm keeping here. So the first cut I want to make is I'm going to cut along this line here, cut off my waist. So just like all my other cuts, make sure I'm staying nice and tight against my ruler, against my guide. Make sure I stay nice and square. And I bring that right up to my cutter, and I make that first cut. Okay, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut this line and this line. So again, nice and tight up against my ruler. Bring that down. Let's go opposite way so I can cut off my waist first. So I bring that down, line up on with my cutter with my line, make that cut. Okay, now I'm just going to cut this and get my 2 remaining pieces. So I bring that down. Okay, again, double check, make sure I'm lined up nicely, tight up against my ruler. I'm not going to shift at all, and cut that. So now I've got my 2 5 and 15/16 inch squares from my sides. Okay, so now that I've got my 2 squares cut out from my sides, I then want to go ahead and lay out for these angled cuts. So 2 and 7/16 from the bottom, or 3.5 from the top, and then 2.5 in from each side. And again, it's the same measurement on this side, so it'd be 3.5 down as well there. So let's go ahead and measure these out. So I'm going to measure down 3.5 inches and make a mark. Now, the key here is when I make that mark, I want to make sure it's nice and straight across and it meets up with the edge of my paper. Now I want to measure over 2.5 inches. Again, I make that mark and make sure it's in line with the edge of my paper, okay, or sheet metal. Now what I want to do is where my mark and the edge of my paper or sheet metal match is where I want to lay my ruler, right where the edge and that mark intersect, and that will give me my angle cut. You can see that gives me my angle cut. Now I just do the same thing to the opposite side. So I measure down, so I measure 3.5, and I mark, and I measure 2.5, and I make a mark. Now I'll show you what I've seen as the biggest mistake. What a lot of students will end up doing is they'll line up with the bottom of their mark, and that's not right, and they'll draw their line like so. Okay, I want to make sure that my line is in line with right where my mark and the edge of my material meet up is where I want my line to be. So I line those up and I go ahead and draw that across. Okay, so it's not that line, it's this line here. Okay, so now I've got those two lines. I just need to repeat that for my other side. Okay, so now that I've got my sides laid out, these are my waist, that's what I'll be cutting off, and I'll be doing that at the foot shear. So now that I've finished laying out my sides, my cuts, I want to go ahead and I want to make these angle cuts. So just like I made the angle cuts for the corners on my main base, I want to make sure that it's going to be clamped down, all right, on a clamping part of the guide and clamping bar. And again, I'm going to look down that little gap in between and make sure that my mark is lined up with my cutter. Okay, so that's lined up. Chop for one side. I'm going to rotate, line that up, and cut my next side. And that's my side piece. I'm just going to repeat from my next one. And I have my side pieces ready to go.